Okay, I've got a number of different things that I'm going to try to cover here, so hopefully it won't be too chaotic. But I'm actually going to hit multiplayer 1v1 and a third format that I've been playing around with a little bit as much as I can, which isn't a lot, which is Canadian Highlander. So this is I want to talk about the multiplayer list, the 1v1 list for Brea, and then we'll talk Highlander last. So in the multiplayer list, currently I'm not using a card that I really want to play, but can't seem to find a slot for, which is Wishclaw Talisman. It's possible that the card I should cut might be something like the blue-red Talisman, since red is such a light color. And I've got Arcane Signet already acting as a 2-drop that produces additional red. Red also is typically not the color you need as much off artifact mana. Of course, it does produce blue as well, which is why we're running it. But red isn't because of Blood Moon effects. You work around it with your artifacts, and of course, this one only half works around it, where the others give you 2 colors, or 3, besides the red. Anyway, so it is the weakest one. However, it is nice to have too, and I'm not really sure that how I feel about Wishclaw. I have some games in here you'll see where Wishclaw does amazing things, and perhaps it's just foolish not to play it. But for now, it's out. In the multiplayer list, I played around with the lands a little bit. I'm still not using Urborg. I put Throne of the High City back in the deck. I'm still not using Urborg, but I am using the Lotus Field. So that's a little harder to use because you have to sacrifice 2 lands, not when you put it into play. And that can be a bit of a challenge. It's not great, of course, if you have just Lotus Field, or a Lotus Field in the land is a risky keep if you don't have a tutor or some dig. But overall, Lotus Field has some upsides too. So over Urborg, doesn't give your opponent black, which is the least drawback to Urborg, but it can be, especially if they have a Cabal Coffers, of course. Or if the mirror, you can fix your opponent's mana. You can't cut them off of black unless you kill your own Urborg, which is a bit of a problem. However, Lotus Field has a couple of upsides in this specific build, which is that it's crazy with Winter Orb, right? Like being able to untap a 3 mana producing land as your 1 land per turn that can't be strip mined or wastelanded is incredible under an orb. So, it's if you tap out for Winter Orb and you draw a Lotus Field, you're pumping the fist, right? You're just going to slam that thing and then you're way ahead. And that's probably the biggest reason to run it. There's another little trick that Lotus Field offers in here. It's good with Weathered Wayfarer when you've got Wayfarer running. Once you get to the point where you're about to break even with your opponent on lands, the last thing you fetch is Lotus Field, and that gives you a couple more activations, so it functions like a kind of a card draw. And I had mentioned this before, it's good to Crucible Worlds. There's also a crazy brought back turn where you go land, turn 3, Lotus Field, brought back the 2 lands you just sacked, and on turn 4, you on your next turn, so you had 2 mana in play, turn 3 you didn't do anything, and then turn 4 you have 6 mana in play, which is nuts. Very, very, very powerful. Lotus Field also, on the other hand, is a little bit weak when it comes to Breya in the sense that you're trying to get 4 different colors of mana and sacking 2 of them to get a land that produces 3 of the same color. Great for Necro, great for Cryptic Command, not great for Breya necessarily. It's also not that great with Shackles, and it's not that great with Treachery. So there's a lot of things that it's not that great with. There's a few things that it is, and I'm not really sure exactly how I feel about it yet. Now, the other card that's not in the deck here that this could be, I actually took Badlands out. I never search for Badlands. Badlands allows Verdant Catacombs to go get red. And I almost never, I don't remember ever doing that. Like Verdant always goes and gets a blue-black land for me, or occasionally black-white. I rarely ever get red mana with it. It allows Windswept Heath to go get black also, right? So by getting Badlands, or not Windswept Heath, excuse me, Wooded Foothills to go get black. So Badlands turns those 2 lands into a fully any color producing land, and without it I can't. And so maybe Lotus Field should just be the Badlands, which is 1 more black for Necro. But for now, I think Lotus Field, because of Winter Orb in particular, and that being the main game plan of this deck, has so much upside that I want to continue to run it. And if it turns out that I'm just not happy with having the card, I'll make it Badlands again, making these other two lands good. I think that during the time that I cut Throne of the High City, I missed it severely, and the card is insane and shouldn't be cut. So that's that. On the 1v1 list, there are some changes, of course. This deck runs limited resources, which which has highly rewarding for you to get up those 5 lands. And so Lotus Field is no good in here. Strip Mine is also banned, so that actually gives 2 extra slots. So I just went ahead and put the Badlands back in, and I put Urborg back in. And we'll just leave it like that. I don't like Lotus Field in this version of the deck because it's terrible with limited resources, which is one of the big plays this deck can make. Whereas it's amazing with Winter Orb, right? So this is the 1v1 list. The other thing that's different in the 1v1 list is Sensei's Divining Top is banned. I've played around with Serum Visions and a bunch of other 1-drops. For now, I actually just ran Mental Misstep. There's something very comforting about trying a Mental Misstep and having it. The card has been restricted in every single format now at this point. There's probably good reason for that. Having an extra Force of Will, we've got Force of Will, Force of Negation, Mental Misstep. Having all these Force of Will effects is pretty grand. I really like it. And I don't know. If I need more search, if I had Sensei's Divining Top, it would be Sensei's Divining Top. But without Top, it's probably fine as a Mental Misstep. We'll see. Ironically, it's better. Misstep is better in a format where Top exists, but so it goes. The other thing that's not in here, that's one of the other things that's different here, is that this deck, because limited resources, is so good for you to get as many lands into play as quickly as you can. But it restricts you to 5 mana, 5 lands. There's a couple ways that you can get ahead of that. One of them is if you have 7 mana on the limited resources turn, or rather 3 mana, but 3 of it white on the limited resources turn. If you had 7 lands in play, or if you had just more than 5, you could limited resources, sacking some lands because you have too many, and brought them back directly into play so that for the rest of the game you are on 6 or 7 and the other person isn't. The other thing you can do is just search for Iskanta that's in here. Search for Iskanta is really a card that's extremely good but not great in a deck that's running Winter Orb and focused around Winter Orb. On the other hand, in a deck that's focused on limited resources, this is a rampant growth that you can play after limited resources is down in order to get to that 6 mana. And having the difference between 6 lands and 5 lands in play can be significant since Breya is an evenly costed commander. And hitting that 6 land drop means that you potentially can replay your commander or play your commander and have an activation ready to go. But then, of course, in addition to that, all of the good stuff that Search for Iskanta does. So I have this in here this could have been, for example, Wishclaw Talisman. I think at one point I had Wishclaw Talisman and Fragmentize as my 2 slots here and here. And that's also quite reasonable, but often you'll find if you're at a point where you feel like 2 cards are equal and one of them's blue, typically the blue card's the better card, just because of cards like Force of Will and Force of Negation. So where I'm on the fence between, say, running Wishclaw Talisman and Wishclaw, I see as a card that's equivalent to Search for Iskanta for the ability to because Wishclaw lets you craft the perfect card into your hand, and Search for Iskanta lets you dig for it. And of course, when it flips, it's Gem de Tome. I mean, it's amazing. So I see those cards as roughly equivalent because with the Wishclaw, you could just wish for, like, say, Necro or Yawgmoth Will or Jace or some kind of other power play that similarly would give you that kind of long-term advantage that Search would give you. And Fragmentize I see is roughly equal to Mental Misstep because Fragmentize is a first turn Soul Ring answer, excuse me, as is Mental Misstep. Later in the game, though, Fragmentize, of course, has, well, Search for Iskanta is a good example of a target. It can also take down a Mana Crypt that Mental Misstep can't, but Mental Misstep can do things like protect you from a duress. So, again, roughly about even, so I think I'm going with the blue cards for the 1v1 list. I'm very, very very happy with how the 1v1 list plays, though I can tell you that. The only card that I'm not sure about is whether or not I should leave. I think I'll leave the Badlands in the 1v1 list, but do I need to bother with the Euroborg just to have that Necro enabling power? Certainly strong. Or could I cut the Euroborg and go back to like I was playing around with different lands. There's options out there, but frankly, this has been working great, and I did kind of miss having that ability to just go play two garbage lands. One, first turn expedition map, second turn junk land, go get Urborg, land, Necro, and boom, all of a sudden I went from a terrible draw start to an amazing start. So there's that. And lastly, I want to hit the freeform Highlander build. Excuse me. So this is the Highlander build. The version I played is slightly different, but this is a Canadian Highlander, so if you don't know, you can play anything. It's a 100-card singleton, not 99. There's no commander. You start at 20 life. However, rather than having a banned list, what they have is a highly restrictive points system in which you get 10 points to spend on cards that have point values. So to give you an example, Ancestral Recall, you can play it, but it costs 7 of your 10 points. So in this deck, the points that I'm using up are basically as follows. So I'm using, let's see if I can find them all. I'm using a point for Mana Drain. I'm using a point for Merchant Scroll. I'm using a point on Mind Twist. I have a 1 point on Balance. 1 point on Stoneforge Mystic. I have a... Then we move into lands. I don't know why, but Library of Alexandria, 1 point card. Tolarian Academy, a 1 point card. Strip Mine, a 2 point card. So a bunch of lands costing me points, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And what is my other 1 point card? Because there is a 1 point card floating around somewhere. Spellseeker. Spellseeker is a 1 point card. Notice 3 ways to go get Mana Drain. And Spellseeker and Mind Twist act as 2 ways to go get Mind Twist or Balance. So, basically Spellseeker gets Mana Drain, Mind Twist, Balance, the 3 other cards that I'm paying points for. So we're running Spellseeker. We're running Mind Twist, Balance, and Mana Drain. They're insane. I'll run Merchant Scroll to go get Mana Drain, but also, of course, Force of Will and stuff like that, Fact or Fiction, whatever. Stoneforge is just an amazing card. Library of Alexandria, I mean, come on. Tolarian Academy, if you can make it work, you should make it work. And Strip Mine with Crucible, of course, very solid. What does this deck try to do? Besides generate insane value off Winter Orb. Now, the other deck that runs Winter Orb has Lotus Field. This deck that runs Winter Orb has Tolarian Academy, a little bit more insane. I also have Land Tax in here. Ivory Tower is in here. So Umezoa's Jitte is not in here. It's a 2 point card. It's the one card that I really wish were in here. Instead, I've got Baleful Strix and that 2-drop artifact creature kind of removal slot. Disenchant's not in here. Instead, I've got Quiet Speculation. Quiet Speculation package looks like this. Deep Analysis, Ray, Grudge, but there's also, you can also do Mystical Teachings or Lingering Souls. So it depends on what kind of opponent you're facing and what the board state is as far as what Quiet Spec gets, but it's basically, this is the Ancestral Recall of the format. That doesn't cost 7 points, right? So what else? What else is going on here? For life gain, there's Zern Orb, Ivory Tower, and Batterskull's in. So Batterskull's in with the Stoneforge. I think life gain's super important in this format. And then because 20 life, no Breya, and for that reason, there's no Necropotence. I am running Toxic Deluge. However, if I want to convert life into cards, I do have a card to do it. I have Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library, Ivory Tower is an old school combo that can be quite good. Some of the other synergies in the deck, it's kind of hard to hit them all. But so there's Balance Zern Orb, where you kill all of your opponent's land and creatures, and maybe even most of their hand, depending on what's going on. And you gain a ton of life in the process. So there's a combo. There is Zern Orb land tax to ensure that you can continue to tax. Land tax rewards scroll rack, so we've got tax rack going, so you can put this together like this. Um, Land tax also rewards ivory tower, so you've got this land tax ivory tower thing going where you can gain a ton of life by just keeping your hand full. This kind of becomes part of this group of cards that works well together. And finally, Sylvan Library is also, say you don't have the scroll rack, but instead you have Sylvan Library, something along these lines is still very powerful because you can get cards into your hand, gain extra life from those cards, convert that life into more cards. So that's kind of awesome there. What else is going on in here? Of course, there's the Narset Coliseum, Narset Dak Faden thing from Brea. You've got the Winter Orb Urza thing, the Winter Orb Feast of Famine, the Winter Orb Tezzeret, the Winter Orb Teferi, so that's all in there. Lingering Souls, really good with Skull Clamp. Just draw 8 sometimes. Of course, if you quiet spec it, then it's draw 4, but hey, that's pretty good. There's another combo in this deck. It's Crucible, Zern Orb, Fastbond. Fastbond is okay with land tax when you draw the lands and you're not going to mess around with anything else and you just need to get going with development, and it's okay as long as you do it in the right order, tax first then Fastbond. But Crucible of Worlds Zern Orb Fastbond is, let's say all you have is an island and it's literally, well, let's assume you have something like, oh, I don't know. Let's say you played it off Command Towers. We're just going to, oh wait, Command Tower's not in this. Let's say you played it off Mana Confluence. So you went Mana Confluence, Fastbond, Zern Orb, you drop a Mishra's Workshop off the Fastbond, you shop Crucible. You're living the dream, right? So why is this insane? Well, what happens is you sack a land to Zern Orb to gain 2 life. Then you replay it from the graveyard, losing 1 life with Fastbond. Then you can tap that land for mana, and you then sacrifice the land that you tap for mana. So let's say it's the Confluence. So you'd lose a life, and now you break even. But you're up a mana. You sack it, replay it, tap it, sack it, replay it over and over and over and over. So you have infinite mana, and then when you're done with that, you just keep replaying it and sacking it over and over and over without tapping it for mana. So you've already generated infinite mana. And then you generate infinite life as well because you lose 1 life when you put it in play and you gain 2. So you get unlimited mana, unlimited life with this combo. It doesn't have to be these lands, by the way. It's just these, these 3 cards plus any land either in your graveyard or in play or in your hand produces infinite mana and cards, which is pretty good. Fastbond is also really good with this guy right here because you've got Fastbond out, you cast a Will, and then you just play all of the lands that you've seen throughout the entire course of the game. Also kind of awesome. So what else is going on in here? I'm trying to think if there's any more combos. There's a few cards that are just really good. So Glen Elendra is just really good against control. Deathrite Shama is really good against anybody, pretty much. Deathrite Shaman, unfortunately you can't clamp it, but the fact that you can exile cards from your opponent's graveyard can be very powerful. It's a way to get rid of a card like Life from the Loam, but it's also a life gain card, so you need a lot of life gain cards. You can see Zern Orb, Ivory Tower. Deathrite Shaman is a life gain card, and Batter Skull, all life gain cards. So you want as many of those as you can. What other kind of combos do we have? To some extent, these 2 cards, not combo, but they're synergized well because Quiet Spec ensures you're going to be playing more flashback cards. We've got 5, and so if you flip one of those flashback cards with Iskanta, it's almost like, like you play Iskanta and then you flip a Deep Analysis into your graveyard and you draw for the turn and then flashback Deep Analysis. This is an insane turn, right? But they're also really good with this guy. So these are all like 3 cards that play real nice together, and they play pretty friendly with this one as well. So although Yawgmoth's Will is not a card I need to sell anybody on, but you get the gist. Tithe and Wayfarer, of course, good with Zern Orb as well. So the other thing, though, is that Wayfarer and Map because I've spent my points on these two guys right here, primarily this guy right here, totally insane, right? Like if you go first turn Wayfarer, second turn go get Library, you probably just win the game. A lot of games are won that way very quickly in the control matches. If either of those cards hit and you're able to fetch Library, a lot of times you win because Strip Mine's 2 points, so people don't play, but Library's 1, so people aren't playing as many Strip Mines as I am typically, and so it's very easy for them to lose to Library. The other thing where that works really well though with Library is this guy, because sometimes you need to get going, you need to get things going, and then you've got to kind of refill your hand, or you get it allows you to quickly pick up 3 or 4 cards in a turn and get the Library activated again when it's not activated. So Library Land Tax also, by the way, is another card that it combos with Sylvan Library, where essentially as is Sylvan Sensei's Divining Top and Scroll Rack, because if you get, we already talked about Scroll Rack, but the other combo besides Scroll Rack is these guys, or mini combo, is because, and Jace, I suppose, if you're looking at the top of your library and you don't like what it is, if Land Tax is letting you shuffle, even if you have no lands left, just getting a free shuffle every turn and looking at 3 new cards, 3 new cards, 3 new cards, very, very strong. So as Kanta, of course, is another card that also combos quite nicely with Sylvan Library. Basically what this deck is, it's just a lot of synergy, right? Fused together so that if you put cards together from this deck, you're just often doing powerful things. And so the greatest threat to this deck, basically it almost doesn't even matter. You just randomly pick 2 cards and you're going to find, to some extent, a synergy between them. So what you'll find is with this deck, if your opponent is very fast, what we're worried about is decks that can kill you before any of those synergies matter. So synergies matter over time. Harmony between cards working together, a combo like Sylvan Library and Ivory Tower where you pay 8 life, you gain 3 and you pay 4, so you're only losing 1 life per turn, so you've turned Sylvan Library into Phyrexian Arena. Those kinds of synergies, or if you have Sylvan Library running well, then you probably already, this already is stupid, right? But you can you can actually draw on their turn, have 8 cards, gain 4 life, pay 4 life, and pick up 2 extra cards, and then play, draw on their turn, so you draw 3 cards per turn. It's totally nuts, right? So the point is, but those kind of synergies take time, and if you're playing against a deck that's really fast and doesn't give you that kind of time, well, then you're in deep trouble most likely. So your biggest opponent is probably mono red, which is why I'm running as much life gain as I am running, or at least trying to. However, the big 3 and then the minor one here. However, I don't know if this deck is good enough to deal with mono red, or if I need more things in it. So one of the cards I was looking at, for example, I could run Collective Restraint, very, very strong card against beatdown in a 5-color deck. This card just often is just a one-sided moat for your opponent. However, it doesn't protect your planeswalkers, which is why it's not in here by default. If this card protected, if it didn't say that's attacking you, if it says that's attacking, then I would play this card in all the Breya decks and this. But because it doesn't protect planeswalkers, it ends up on the sidelines, which is a shame because before planeswalkers, this card used to be. People who are around in this time know this card was totally dominant. But anyway, so my point is there may need to be, getting back to the point, there may need to be more life gain in this, but I don't know because I don't get enough games against mono red. I don't get enough games of Highlander at all. But this is my start here, and we'll see what happens. Now I want to run through some games. And if you've gotten this far, hopefully you will enjoy yourself. So as you can see, I'm turning all the results on, and in the last 7 days, I haven't had any losses. It's been pretty good. So I have had a lot of games against 5CBS here, and I've had some games against another fan of the channel, Stryan. And so that's been really interesting. And I think your Rainbow Unicorn is, I think. So I've got lots of interesting games. You can see a mix of Commander. I think these 5-color bad stuff games were Highlander, if I remember correctly. And then I've got standard Breya. So I'll just go through everything. I don't exactly remember. There have been some tunes and tweaks, but I do know that there were some really interesting games here. So we'll just spin through them all, and hopefully you'll enjoy yourself. That is the point, after all. And boy, I do hope if there's any fans of you, if any of you are fans. So yeah, so this game against Rager, my opponent concedes, but look at that start. That start is insane, right? Like I would have loved to have played that game out. Anyway, if there's any fans who want to try Highlander, I would love to play. So we should give it a shot if we can. All right, here's a game. Opponent Creature Sliver is playing Grand Arbiter Augustin. I have to mulligan multiple times to get down to just this little bit of hand, but fortunately it's got a decent start. I've got Plowshares. If my opponent runs something out that I need to target, I decide that's going to have to do. And on this turn, I can accelerate really fast and go in on a Dark Confidant. And by doing it this way, it means that if I play a land, I could play Breya here. So if my opponent, unfortunately, has a Torpor Orb, which is going to cause Breya's ability not to work. So I kind of want that off the table before I get Breya down if I can help it. And my opponent doesn't have removal for Confidant, so the next card I draw will have undone my mulligan, and then after that, it's all gravy. So this is Commander proper, so I get to double strip mine my opponent here. And look at that, Skull Clamp I get. I'm not going to use it yet because I'm expecting to Wayfarer, but very nice to have. Go and fetch Lotus Field here. Run out a Gilded Lotus. My opponent doesn't have a solution for it. So as you can see, this is the full powered version. It runs Lotus Field. So what Lotus Field means is that my opponent, if they don't play a land here, I can't use Wayfarer theoretically, but with Lotus Field I can. So my opponent might as well just play their lands and let me continue to Wayfarer, which is what I want to be doing. All right, so I get an Imperial Seal there. I'm going to go ahead and tutor again. Get a Cavern of Souls. I fetch, clamp, and put together a Umezawa's Jitte. I'm not quite sure why I went the route of Jitte here, but I guess it's acceptable. I offer my opponent a trade. They take it, and I kill their commander. I guess the commander was a bit of a pain for me. Opponent plays Aethersworn Canonist. The idea here is I've got... Oh, that's right. So I had Skull Clamp, but I didn't have... I can't get my tokens off Torpor Orb, so I'm not going to get extra cards here. My opponent runs out an Aura of Silence, which is interesting. Aethersworn Canonist over there kind of hurting both of us, so I'm okay with that. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. Equip the Jitte and Vamp, and then I'm going to go ahead and attack in. Opponent decides to kill my Jitte, so I go ahead and gain some life and sack it, and my Grim to kill their creature. Pass for the turn. Opponent then runs out Spelltithe Enforcer. I will have the mana, of course, to play. But I decide I'm just going to kill that thing because the card I fetched up was Necropotence. I'm at 20 life here. That's why I gained life earlier. It should have been a tell as far as what I tutored for. And now the game is over. So I actually sacked my Clamp, if you noticed. The reason I sacked my Clamp was because, one, I was going to get Necro, two, and I didn't really need it that much, and two, I wasn't going to be dealing with the Torpor Orb. I'm just not going to be able to do much. Anyway, I Narset into Crucible into strip mine my opponent's planes again. Necro a bunch of cards, and my opponent good games me at this point. Yeah, totally over, obviously. So pretty cool stuff there. So fun game. All right, and that was who was that against? Sorry, that was it Creature Sliver or was that Colt? I think that was Creature Sliver. So we'll run this game against Colt, unless I've mistaken. Yeah, who's playing Torban, Thane of Red Fell. And strangely enough, I saw multiple people running this. I've got a Necropotence hand, which I'm not pleased about. However, if I can get it out early enough against an aggressive red deck, well then, oh boy, my opponent's got a Soul Ring. Well, not looking like I will, but maybe. I don't know. So anyway, I'm gonna go get Coalition Relic charged up here. I'm setting up for Necro, obviously. Fortunately, my opponent's like going a little bit slowly over there with whatever it is that they're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and value will here because I really want Breya against this opponent. And but I want to get as much as I can out of the will first. The idea here is if I can get the Soul Ring off the board, I'm in pretty good shape. And my opponent runs out this Torban. I go ahead and just charge. I'm not sure why they played that into my commander there, but I am going to take it out. And I'm going to, speaking of taking things, I'm going to go ahead and Dak Fade in their Soul Ring. I don't need to kill it just yet. My opponent Chaos Warps and does not swing. And from there, I'm able to just Factor Fiction into a counter, sculpt my hand quite nicely, plow their commander attack, and pass. I've got a Mana Crypt out. I go ahead and sculpt away the Necropotence as part of the Dak Faden. My opponent then Mizium Mortars, and I just let that happen. I'm going to gain some life, charge, and prepare to win this game with Teferi and Forbid and everything else that I have going, and my opponent wants nothing to do with it and gives up, which makes sense. They're way, way, way behind. And, I mean, I'm at 16, so it's just not going to work out. So, anyway, next game was against OG Bobby R. Hombus. Bobby Rhombus. OG Bobby Rhombus, which, not to be confused, the original gangster Bobby Rhombus, not to be confused with the Bobby Rhombuses that you see running around more typically. Anyway, my opponent's playing Yawgmoth Thran Physician and gets a turn to Demonic Tutor, so I was thinking it's going to be like a Soul Ring turn here. No surprise it is, but I am surprised when they go get Hedron Archive instead of running out their commander. I'm okay with that, though. I'm going to go ahead and Mystical Tutor here. And card I go get is Mana Drain because with Mana Drain, I can, they've got so much mana here, I can't do a lot. But if with Mana Drain, at least they can't do a lot. And it buys me some time, and then I could tutor for Snapcaster instead. Opponent just heedlessly runs a 4-drop into my Mana Drain. So during my upkeep, I'm going to Snapcaster the Mystical Tutor, and I'm going to Mystical Tutor, thank you for 4 mana, into Vandal Blasting 4 mana off my opponent's board and 2 cards, considering the Hedron could have drawn. Opponent does get a play here, but I just Vindicate their Swamp and leave them on Cabal Coffers that are kind of useless, and they're down to about 3 mana now. I'm going to run out some cards here, get Breya going. I've got an Opal on the board, in really good position, and of course, Teferi will refill my hand very soon if my opponent doesn't dump it. They vamp tutor me, and I go ahead and kill their creature before anything else happens. They clearly vamp for an Urborg there, but I have Teferi to kill their commander, smash in again. So I'm focusing on pressure. Opponent's Urborg will enable their Cabal Coffers to do good things, but at this point my opponent decides to pack it in. The neat thing is that at least the Urborg is turning on my Mishra's Workshop, so I actually have mana to sack Breya and Mox Opal here if I need to, kill something, and then from there, basically my opponent can't get at my Teferi. They're low on resources. They give up a little prematurely, honestly, but I guess what they're thinking is that once Teferi starts running, it is certainly over. And I have the advantage of aggression, so I'd be drawing cards and putting pressure on my opponent. One or the other's bad. 2 is real bad. So I guess I understand why they conceded. Anyway, 5-color bad stuff here is playing Anafenza and leads off with a Leyline. Meanwhile, I have to mulligan into a very sketchy hand that was keepable because of Crucible. My opponent has turn 0 Leyline, and I have Crucible. This is disappointing to say the least. I should have run out the Mox Diamond here probably, just so I could use top here, but when my opponent's smallpoxes, I'm thinking, my goodness, I am so hosed. And I just get rid of the Crucible though, because what am I going to do? I'm going to use the top here and hold the Mox Diamond, because my opponent has other cards that make me discard in their choice. Mox Diamond's a card I want to throw away. I don't want less cards in my hand, or if I get hemmed or something. So even though the Throne doesn't produce colored mana, I'm holding on to Mox Diamond anyway. And there's always a chance that I could find a way to get a couple cards in my hand in a single turn and then run out Mox and a land. Meanwhile, my opponent's developing over there, but doesn't have a ton of pressure on me. I'm searching, of course, for land for Narset and not finding it, but I do find mana that I can use to get more into play, so I'm a little bit slow here. I take a look searching for a land drop. I was going to just use top and play the land, but there is no more land, so I'm really hoping that more land doesn't get killed on my side of the board since I'm kind of stuck. And of course, it does. On top of that, there's that Mox that I throw away, and then I throw away Mind Twist. Opponent's almost out of cards completely. And worst thing is that my top card is Snapcaster Mage, which of course is semi-useless since I have no graveyard. But I put it there because I would like to get a Narset down, and Snapcaster Mage will can block. Now here's the thing. I decide that waiting for all that at 12 life, getting beat down for 4 per turn, is too slow. I'm going to play Narset and treat it as a draw a card of my choice and gain 4 life effect, which is what I assume is going to happen here. So I go ahead and just take, boom, I take a Mystical Tutor, so that'll give me an out against this thing, and we'll call it good there. But I believe, yeah, my opponent claims more mana and then decides not to kill my Narset. A big mistake, I think. Very big tactical error there. So I'm going to top in. I actually find land here, Narset into a mana drain, and I'm going to pass. So I wanted to I want a Mystical Tutor, but I'm trying to set up mana and I'm trying to get cards. And it means I have to be willing to take more of a beatdown. I'm going down to 7. It's very dangerous. I've got Pain here. Both of my lands are Pain lands. Also, if you notice, the Confluence and the Colosseum. So I have to play extremely tight here. But so far, so good. My opponent Assassin's Trophies. I just choose not to shuffle and I let it go. Apply the Anafenza. Pass for the turn. Still not... my opponent was thinking that Assassin's Trophy would force me to shuffle and that I would lose the card I tutored for, the Plowshares. But my opponent is also down to only 1 card in hand. So I have 1 mana drain, they have 1 card in hand. Holy crap. I've drawn every single graveyard card against this Leyline of the Void. It's been just brutal. It's like I mulliganed to 2, and then I drew 3 cards that don't do anything. So it's like I've mulliganed to... I mulligan twice, and then 3 cards that don't do anything, so it's like I mulligan to 2. Anyway, I get to mana drain there, and that is going to give me a ton of value here. I'm going to actually fix my mana situation this way by hurting my opponents. And actually, my opponent is 1 mana short of playing their commander. I need to get my commander down at 3 life with Pain lands in play. So I played it this way. My opponent does run out Anafenza, but then he plays an Urborg to do it. And Urborg, remember what I said about Urborg sometimes having drawbacks? Well, it definitely does here, because now I can tap Confluence and Colosseum. If I tap them for a black, I take no damage, which is very important. So I actually have a mana leak up, and I can cast it off the Confluence and not take any damage here. My opponent goes for a Pithing Needle. So I'm going to have to kill Anafenza once more and let it stick. And so Breya is now just a 4/4, no abilities. My opponent then has life from the loam and gets additional mana and cards. However, they're lands and it doesn't have the full value just yet. So on my turn, I'm going to go ahead and, because he doesn't have a cycling land yet, I'm going to go ahead and run out to Fairy, and I'm going to draw here and get in for some damage. And then hopefully my mana leak will do some good for me. I actually had been planning to play that turn slightly different, which is why I didn't tap the Strip Mine instead of the Coalition Relic. Oh no, it's because I was trying to protect my life total. Anyway, opponent runs out on Anafenza. I'm not going to kill that thing. I'm not going to counter that thing. Instead, I'm just going to charge and get some mana here. I'm going to DAC myself again. I don't want Clamp because I'm not going to get... basically, I'm looking at this game. I'm trying to finish this game off as quickly as I can. And cards aren't going to die with Leyline. Of course, Clamp doesn't work with Leyline, so it was yet another card that Leyline is hosing. So pretty gnarly stuff. But I do manage to quickly speed things up. I get my Sword of Feast and Famine going here, and then I follow it with a Chromatic Lantern. So now I don't have to worry about color. And I'm going to go ahead and take out the Anafenza with the Mana Crypt and with Breya. And now I'm sitting on a Mana Leak here. I've got Coalition Relics I can charge, active DAC running, active Teferi running. Feeling pretty good. Not great. My opponent goes for a Demonic Tutor. I'm quite hoping that my opponent is getting something that I can kill. And when counter and my opponent, so I have to make a, this is a gamble. So my opponent runs out a 3-drop. And that 3-drop's pretty good. The 3-drop almost kills me. It actually would have taken me to 1 by making me discard. So I have to play the Mana Leak so that that doesn't happen. However, oh no, I'm sorry. 1 or fewer cards. So actually I would have taken 2 for sure. But they can -1 it to make me discard. But here's the thing with it. My opponent played it and had 3 mana up. So I want to play the Mana Leak, and I have to make a gamble here. It's the last card in my opponent's hand. He has no other plays for the turn, so I decide to go for my risky play, which is my Gambit, which is the Strip Mine his best land. And my opponent, because, tapping it in response and then having no play, this feels kind of dumb. Let it happen, which is exactly what I needed. So I'm able to actually Mana Leak this card. It doesn't go to his play. It goes to the graveyard because he didn't float the mana. And with that, and he recognizes, oops, that was a bit of a misplay. But yeah, yes, and it was. However, it is too late now. I'm going to run out Grim Monolith. I'm going to equip Stoneforge, I think, here. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and just get Breya down so that I can get out of... Basically, I get out of the danger zone. I equip Stoneforge. I smash in for 3. Opponent drops to 8. And then I get enough mana, and I'd say sack, sack, sack. And my opponent takes 3, 6, 9. And I win the game. This, whatever this is doing right now, is bugging out. So this was the turn that I kill my opponent. But pretty neat game against 5-color bad stuff there. And it was an interesting turn. You can see how a very tiny tactical error, not tapping your land in response to a strip mine, turns out to matter. That's, I'm sure 5CBS is going to remember that going forward. Even though it feels silly and stupid to float the mana anyway. I don't always float the mana in my games, but here's the thing. I float mana whenever I'm concerned about Force Spike or any other spike type effect, including Mana Leak, spell pierce, any of that stuff, right? So I don't float the mana when my opponent wastelands me. And I've got 3 blue untapped. They wasteland me. Now I have 2 blue. I still have a counterspell. And they're not playing, and they're playing like mono red or something, right? I don't bother floating the mana in those cases because it's just a hassle. But anytime I'm playing against blue, white, stuff like that, I will float it because there's Mana Tithe, Force Spike effects, and in this case, 5CBS got nailed by 1. But anyway, so we'll run through some more games here. I clearly have, this is Anafenza again. I have to mulligan, double mulligan again. Very terrible start. So, yeah. Yes, please. Thank you. Sorry about that. And then my opponent plays a Collective Brutality and actually ends up mulliganing himself, wasting a turn because I don't have anything that Brutality will hit. So I go ahead and get Sword, very good against green, black, blue. Smallpox is here again, killing my Stoneforge, and I throw away Copy Artifact. Doesn't look like it's going to be super relevant here. But my opponent's already down to just 2 cards, and I have a very mana-heavy draw, so I'm actually going to wasteland my opponent here, taking him down to only the 2 lands that you see. I get smacked a little bit with a Mutavault there. I'm planning to Enlighten Tutor, and I'm trying to protect my life total a little bit so I don't actually run out the sword. Opponent then dumps Bloodghast under a Chrome Mox, DTs for a Crypt, smashes me for some damage, so it's really ramped up the mana play, but instead I just tutor up a Crucible and strip mine my opponent's green-white land, and now that he's down to just single black, Mind Twists me for 3. 2 of them are lands, though. I'm going to go ahead and Wasteland again, killing the Mutavault. Wasteland again, killing the Thespian Stage. I find a Mox over the course of 2 turns, so I throw away land there, which is perfect. Opponent's just sitting there now, basically toast. Outer Resources, Crucible crushing the mana denial black player, as Crucible has done for a long time now. And I get to run out Breya with an Ancient Tomb up so that I can sack and kill something if I need to. The game is completely flipped, and opponent does get a Ravenous Rat away the Remand in my hand, but yeah, it just doesn't matter too much. Go ahead and play the Wasteland again, so it's safe from a Bojuka Bog potentially. Start the beatdown. Opponent just has no plays because totally choking on mana there. I'm heavily mana flooded here. I'm finding, other than that remand, I'm finding pretty much no action at all. Certainly no proactive cards, so I'll just keep playing mana. At least Breya is going to be around for a while. Even if my opponent managed to clear the board, it just pops right back down. He does get a land and tithe, so he's able to get 2 lands here, which is pretty strong. However, of course, I'm going to continue to hit with the Wasteland plan. So he picks up a basic Plains there, which is safe from the Wasteland. But remember, Brea is putting pressure during my opponent's upkeep. I go and attempt to get the kill, and it sticks. No fast effects, so opponent dies. Because although Tithe was going to slightly get him out of the hole that he was in mana-wise, it did nothing for the hole in his life total. So finally, in game 3, he plays Thrasios and Tymna against me, and gets a first turn, going first, Ponder into Crypt draw, which is just savage. Incredible amounts of speed and deck control as well. This is very, very scary. Gets to run out of Thrasios. I go first turn, land nothing. Second turn, land. I draw a Tundra, which was really disappointing. I didn't want to draw the Tundra here, but it is what it is. So I go ahead and get 2 lands, and boom. Turn 2. So my opponent had 4 mana to my 1, and at the end of turn 2, it's 4 to 4, and actually my mana is better in most cases because it produces all of the colors I need for Breya. My opponent's dealing damage to himself with Crypt, and if I disenchant that or attack it, I can take out 2 lands with a single target. So until Winter Orb comes down or something like it, it's pretty good recovery for me. My opponent does get to play Tymna and draw. Meanwhile, during my upkeep, I fetch with Hallowed Fountain because there's only 1 Plains left in the deck, and I want to make sure I don't draw it along with the Tundra that I drew earlier, right? All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and run out Breya here and Imperial Seal, and let's see what I get. So hopefully Tymna is off, but even if my opponent removes Breya, there's still the 2 Thopters to block. Plays a Bird of Paradise for the turn. Pretty good card. I wish I could access that thing. Doesn't get to draw with Tymna and just passes for the turn. So the card I fetched, Treachery, actually, because Treachery is totally nuts. If I can Treachery Tymna and start attacking with Thopter, I just win. I get a little greedy here. What I could have done was Merchant Scrolled for mana drain and passed, and that's what I should have done. But if I Treachery here and it lands, I win the game. So I go for 5 mana, win the game, instead of waiting to win the game next turn. And so I get punished with a counterspell. Opponent drew and plays a Sylvan Library and has a Wasteland, so now I'm getting heavily punished because I'm not pressuring my opponent's life total, so I'm going to have to do that now. So I go for a Dark Confidant here. Are we going to bug? This game might bug out. Oh no. It's a bug game. It was a really good one too. Shoot. Well, basically I realize I have to pressure my opponent's life total with the Sylvan, so I start taking chunks of 4 life out of there. And I go get a counterspell. I get Dark Confidant. 5 CBS does draw extra cards, but what ends up happening is that between the Mana Crypt, the Sylvan, and the Breya punches, ends up like getting way too low, and I just finish my opponent off. He never gets to use his lifelink on his commander here, so because I can block and sack the Thopters in response. I think he says like both at one point, and I block one. I block them both, sack, and kill one of these commanders, probably Thrasios actually, because it has the activation cost to draw cards, whereas Tymna has to connect, and that's much harder to do here. Or maybe it's the lifelinker, I don't remember, but At any rate, Crypt, Library, Breya, and Breya abilities ends up causing 5CBS to just take too much damage, and I'm able to finish him off with a Breya activation or a swing. So that was how that game played out. And then I move on to these games against Coors Wolf here. And we're going to get through these multiplayer games, and we're going to move to the Highlander. We're playing Una, and I've got a pretty gnarly start. So we'll run out a lot of mana here. I go ahead and shuffle away the top cards. I didn't like them. I'm just looking for something to get some more cards into my hand. With all this mana, I want acceleration. My opponent asks, like, did I miss something? Is this competitive? And I was like, yes, we're in the 1v1 room, you know. So then I sent some links and we start chatting, and my opponent was cool about it if I remember correctly. So yeah. Anyway, and then we talk about ban list and things like that. But anyway, I just get turn 2 to Fairy. What is it, turn 2? Yeah, turn 2 to Fairy, draw extra cards. I'm sitting on a disenchant. I can Merchant Scroll, but there's no point here just yet. I think I'd rather have disenchant up, because if they go land, mana, rock, I want to kill it, or Bitter Blossom or something. I want to kill it right away. So just played the Jite there. I would have liked to have Merchant Scroll, but next turn I can plus Teferi, then Merchant Scroll, and then I'll get the lands back anyway. So I was just waiting on that. Anyway, if I had a blue card in my hand, though, I would have Merchant Scroll for Force of Will to protect this board. Either way, though, my opponent scoops it up and we move on. That was Coors Wolf. Planet Merkay is my next opponent. And I have a mulligan. He's playing Edgar Markov. I am not really a big fan of Edgar at all. I think not only is it's good but not great, and it's incredibly boring. Like, it is, when the 1v1 format was around, Edgar was just everywhere. And my goodness, was it ever boring. Anyway, my opponent runs out Dark Tutelage. I'm not sure why I don't remand that. I guess I really wanted mana. I just decide I'm gonna work around it and accelerate so much that I'm better off running it this way. So I just run out just a million mana. And my opponent does play Swiftfoot Boots here and some kind of creature. I am, of course, going to attack. Excuse me. They're going to attack. I'm going to Mystical Tutor. And I go get Teachings. So Teachings is going to clear off the Dark Tutelage. So we'll get rid of that. My opponent instead just concedes. So I have Teachings with a million mana in play, and obviously, if they it gives me an incredible amount of deck power, right? So I don't know fully why they concede here, but I mean, clearly I'm going to go get Disenchant, right? I'm going to disenchant the Tutelage, and now they're down to just the 4 cards. They're going to play a little bit, but I get to flashback Teachings and refill my hand that way. I mean, I guess I understand the concession, but on the same time, like, if you're already playing that incredibly boring commander, you would think that you would have the kind of mentality that's like, well, I would think that you're a glutton for punishment and you'd stick around, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that commander's not boring for some. I think it's just miserable. Anyway, Lavinia, but maybe it's just because I faced it so many times in 1v1. It was just boring. Anyway, opponent's going second, Jimmy Wang here, running Lavinia, and I get a turn to Jace draw back and a Force of Negation on top of that. I draw 3 and look at the insane cards that I draw there. So I'm going to get to put Jite back, right? And then I put Wayfarer back and I go run out Crypt and cast Chromatic Lantern and pass with Force of Negation in our setup. Like, how do you beat this? Well, you don't. So my opponent just scoops, especially when my opponent's commander, remember, I had so few lands. So my opponent's commander punishes this deck heavily for being such a land-light deck, but it just wasn't able to do its job because I had such a fast start that by the time things got going, the game's already over. And that's the problem with these containment commanders, is that if your opponent, the containment commanders that act as preventative measures like that, Gaddock Teague, that guy, and others, they try to keep your opponent contained before they can get going. They stop them before they can start. And so the problem is, if they get a start, your commander doesn't help you at all. Whereas Breya takes the philosophy of, yeah, you're going to get started, but I'll deal with it later. One of the abilities that Breya is going to do will handle it, or the flyers, or the beatdown, right? So I like that a lot better. It's just it's a better because it means that you don't just lose and your opponent gets a good draw, right? Anyway, here's another guy, Dr. Punanas 144 playing Torban Thrain of Red Falls again. Like I said, I've seen a lot of this mono red commanders show up lately for some reason. So I've got an acceptable start. It had an answer for early Soul Ring, or in this case Ruby Medallion. So we'll go ahead and tutor, grab a land, and take out that medallion. It turns out that my opponent's running Rampaging Ferocidon. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just end of turn fetch and plow, and then on my turn I'm going to Trinket Mage into more mana into more mana. So now I feel pretty good about this draw. Opponent runs out Chandra's Spitfire and misses a land drop conspicuously, so I go ahead and just kill their land in Teachings. Opponent then runs out a bunch of mana sources and gets their commander on board. Deals a bunch of damage to me, but I am going to not care for a little while. And so what I do is I vamp for strip mine. I strip mine their land. I Snapcaster and kill their land again. Finally, I'm going to play Breya here, and the beatings will stop where my opponent has run out of gas and only has one land in play. Top deck a sword there, and so now I can take the cards out of their hand as well. Potentially, opponent chooses to chump instead, fine with me. That's one less threat on the board against my 14 life, and that is it. They're completely locked down. As I said, Breya containing retroactively retroactively. It's proactive. It's a proactive card because it's a threat, but it retroactively contains rather than trying to do it as a preventative measure. So you get to solve problems rather than stopping problems from starting. And actually solving problems in this game, stopping them from starting is what counter magic's for, and discard and land control. But starting, dealing with problems after they've happened is what the rest of your deck should be for. So kind of a weird thing there. Anyway, so now I've got some interesting games here. These are freeform games. So these were the Canadian Highlander and 5 Killer Bad Stuff. We were chatting and he jumped in. And so here we go. We're going to run through some Canadian Highlander. I'm going to hit up these last two. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit up these last two Commander games, multiplayer, and then I'll run through the Highlander, and then I'll save the 1v1s for a second video because there's just too many of them. This video has gone very long. So we'll run through this last two, and we'll have these 5 bonus Highlander games tacked onto the end. So these were multiplayer list, one-on-one matches. I've got a slow but adequate start. Top helping me to get my mana drops. And as long as my opponent's not too quick out the gates here, I'm probably okay. I don't actually need more land drops, so I see 3 lands and I shuffle those away and find myself a Mind Twist, so I'll take that. Leaving a land on top. I, of course, do need another land drop, but I don't need to preempt my land drops. Anyway, so my opponent, I don't need a pile of them. So opponent plays a War's Toll here. I know the top card's land, so I'm going to take that, give up the top here, and stop the War's Toll with the Forbid, and then run out a land and pass. So end of turn, my opponent makes no threatening plays, and so end of turn I've got a free reign to Factor Fiction. My opponent decides to give me a land and a counterspell. All I could ask for there. And I even got a Muddle the Mixture to go with it. So I go ahead and play a Chromatic Lantern here. I play a tapped Steam Vents and I pass. I Muddle the Mixture, my opponent's Bedevil, which would have killed my Chromatic Lantern. And the opponent's now got 5 cards in hand, so it's time to go Spellseeker here into a Mana Drain. And I'm all set to go upstairs with the Mind Twist. I could have twisted there and then my opponent plays their commander, but this way, there's really... I do not understand these players who are running 6 drops into mana drains. I don't think they understand how insane that is, but I'm cool with it. So we'll go ahead and play Sword, Tezzeret, equip the Sword, smash in, get a tapped land. Before I can make my opponent discard their hand, they concede. So they're going to discard a card here, and then I'm going to hit him for 3, and I'm going to have 3 mana up so I can cast Force of Negation or Mana Leak after the and opponent just scoops up and says, I'm sure you have a full play group of friends who lose to you and welcome your presence. And I send him a link to my channel and I say I have about 150, and my opponent doesn't want to hear that, I guess. But it's more like, look, I understand it was a mismatch. Again, it happens sometimes. We're not all looking for the same experience when we play Magic, and what can I do? I gotta do me. You do you. Anyway, so this Mexa Fury here is playing Kaikar, wins Fury, and gets an early look at my hand, but it's a very strong hand against the deck running blue. It's got Dak Faden after all. And I've got a Vamp Tutor to set things up, Tithe to get a little extra cards. However, I play none of those things because my opponent's had a look at my hand. So if I Vampiric Tutor, I'm not really setting up anything that they're not prepared for, potentially. And I don't have a lot of action in my hand, so I don't, well, the Snapcaster changes things, but I don't want to 2-for-1 myself by Vampiric Tutoring for a card that they're going to counter. Instead, I want to wait until I can set up a turn where I make multiple plays. And I didn't want to Tithe because I didn't want to discard. So anyway, my opponent, knowing I have Dak Faden now, runs out, and Vampiric Tutor, runs out Talisman. So I'm just going to go Land Mox, Dak, Snag. This game's basically over now. Opponent built Boros Charms as Dak Faden, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up 2 extra lands here off a Tithe and then play my commander if I wish, or I can Vampiric Tutor. Looks like we might be bugging out this game. Yeah. But as you can see, excuse me, yeah, I mean, the game's over in terms of, because I get to Snapcaster, Vampiric Tutor, and go get card drawing, and then from there, there's no coming back for this opponent. So that was that game there. Hold on a quick sec. So I think I've realized, hey honey. Yeah. So I think I realized what's happening. The 2 times that my games have bugged out, you're running the microwave, and I think it's interfering with the wireless just enough. That could very well be. Yeah. Anyway. Sorry about that. No worries. Anyway, all right. So back to the game. Sorry about that. Anyway, I think I figured out why those 2 games bugged out potentially. I'm guessing that the bugged games are somehow happening when Magic Online's connection, like when your internet connection isn't as good. Maybe Magic Online hiccups. So it sends like the command for whatever the next play is, and your replay mechanism misses that because it hiccups because of a bad connection. And then after that, all the commands it's sending are out of order and confusing and probably fail. What might be interesting is that if it compiled all the commands into one packet, not packet, but sort of file, and then sent the file. So it's like preparing replay, and you just wait. And then when it's done, replay ready. And then you can just run the entire replay on your computer in one shot. That might actually solve that problem if that's the source of the bug. But it just occurred to me. Anyway, so now we're going to run through these 3 games against 5-color bad stuff, running the deck that you're probably not as familiar with, the one that I spent a lot of time talking about at the beginning. This one, there are a couple of minor changes. And I think I had made a big mistake. When I was putting the deck together, I didn't realize Umezawa's Jitte is a pointed card. As a matter of fact, Umezawa's Jitte is 2 points, so they consider one Umezawa's Jitte to be worth a mana drain and a balance. A mind twist and a balance, right? Or a mana drain and a balance, or a mana drain and a mind twist. I don't get it, but okay. So I actually think I had Umezawa's Jitte for these games, and I don't think it ever came up. Hope it didn't, because I was at 12 points, and I figured it out later and pulled the Jitte out, but felt pretty dumb doing that. I actually had Talisman of Creativity was not in here, and the Jitte was in there, so I just made that switch and carried on. But anyway, we'll go back to the games, but that is the one thing I know for sure it was different, but I don't think it ever came up. And these we played matches, so we'll take a look. No commander, 20 life, and I have an insane start. Look at this start. So remember, Library of Alexandria is in this deck, right? First turn Weathered Wayfarer. My opponent has no play, and yeah. Turn 2 Polluted Delta Pass means that I can go get library here potentially. So opponent runs has no turn 2 plays. That's just too slow, right? I'm going to sack Wayfarer. I can also go get blue mana, but I decided, nah, I'm just getting library. Let's not mess around here. And then draw for the turn. I get a library, and I go ahead and use this opportunity to cast Quiet Spec. Remember, Quiet Speculation is actually going to draw extra cards for me. So I'm leaving Wayfarer mana up, and I'm going to pass. But I also have, with the Savannah, I've got Ancient Grudge up. I've got Deep Analysis, and I chose Lingering Souls. Opponent runs out Wood Elves, and Wood Elves against Weathered Wayfarer with a library means that I don't even have to bother flashing back Deep Analysis. Sorry, it's just so much fun. And yeah, I'm on the library plan. So during my upkeep, I go ahead and Weathered Wayfarer again, go get a Wasteland, play land for the turn and pass. And now, I mean, this is just gross, right? Library during upkeep on my opponent's side, starting to get mana rocks here. I've got counter magic up. I'm going to go ahead and remand that, keeping my library active if my opponent does something like land duress. All right, so yeah, this is getting super, super gross. So I'm going to run out Talisman here and pass. I've got a counter spell up still, so opponent continues to play lands, which means my Wayfarer is still good, which is not good for my opponent either. Runs out of Nissa. I'm going to go ahead and draw a card and let that stick, or am I? I'm going to counter. Oh, because it would flip. Yeah, I don't want to deal with that. There's no Breya to take it down. Opponent decides not to swing there. It's a missed land, but not a big deal. I'm going to Wayfarer, grab myself a Strip Mine. So now I'm going to go after his mana pretty hard, right? So I'm going to go Wasteland, Strip, Flashback Grudge, get an Ivory Tower out, pass to the turn. Just gross. I thought, are we going to bug? We're going to bug. Anyway, as you might imagine, I somehow managed to win this game. The damage my opponent's going to deal to me is completely negated. I'm getting 4 life, 5 life per turn, because I get to Grudge here, and then my opponent, I think he plays a land, and I get to Wayfarer. Maybe not. I think I grudged here, and then I flash back Lingering Souls, something like that, and I just leave Library up. And then I Library on my opponent's turn. I've got the 2 flyers, so I'm able to start applying pressure here. I'm getting 4 life per turn and drawing multiple cards per turn. It gets even more insane shortly after that. I mean, the game's super over, super runaway game. So we just move into game 2 here. And I have to mulligan. That first hand just really was ineffective. Second hand looks acceptable, not great, but it does have Sylvan, it does have Ancient Grudge. Force of Negation makes this hand a lot better, so I'm not going to ponder because I want to be able to defend myself with a Force. And it's a good thing. My opponent, I think. No, it runs out of Talisman. Okay, so I'm cool with that. Of course, I have Grudge in my hand. So it's a decision. Do I want to Grudge here first, or do I want to Sylvan? Now, I don't have Bayou in this deck, so I have to go get Savannah here. I would have preferred Bayou. I decided I'm going to run out Sylvan, though, because if I force Negation here, I'm going to have almost no cards in my hand, and I want to refill. Unfortunately, it's a Tireless Tracker from my opponent. But we'll see what Sylvan finds for me. Well, it finds a Stoneforge, which is good. Deep Analysis, which I don't want. I'm going to pay 4 life so I can shuffle it away. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and Grudge away that Clue and the Talisman. I killed the Clue because if my opponent misses a land drop here, that Clue might have been able to find him a land. So they go for a Sylvan Scrying, and I decide I'm going to actually force that. I'm not seeing land from my opponent. Unfortunately, I do have one, so bummer. But at least I didn't get Wastelanded or something. So I'm going to get hit a little bit harder with that tracker. I look at some cards here. I find a Baleful Strix, so we'll go ahead and play a land, play Strix. I think. No, I'm gonna take my opponent's hand out. Strix is gonna deal with the tracker. I mean, as far as beating my face in a second, but let's go ahead and dump my opponent's hand, and I get Nissa, Duress, and Tomb. Very glad to see that go. He top decks a Stinkweed Imp, and I have to take more damage. I'm down to 4, or 6 rather. I get hit for 4, but I can Stoneforge away. I don't want the Mox Diamond on top of my deck, so I Stoneforge that away, getting a Batterskull and playing a Baleful Strix. So the Batterskull can climb me out of the hole that I'm in terms of life totals, provided I don't get like hemmed here or something. And unfortunately, again, my opponent draws a land, so it's card drawing with tracker. Tracker is so insane. and a Safekeeper swings in. Now not missing the beats, but yeah, I've got oh, that was another combo I didn't really mention, or pseudo combo, right? Is Sylvan Library with Batterskull. So I've got Batterskull ready to go. I've got Remand ready to go. Opponent hits another land drop, and then is able to draw more cards off the clue. A 6/5 is too big for a Batterskull to kill. Sends in just the imp. So I'm going to go ahead and end step Stoneforge, opponent Vampirics in response. I let that go. I'm not quite sure what that's about, doing it in response like that, but okay. All right, so Sylvan's going to find me some more mana. And I decide to equip the Batterskull to the Strix and smash for 5. So now I couldn't, if I swung for 4, the tracker just blocks and kills it. But by doing it this way, I actually get 5 life. I get more life, right? And then I've got the Strix. I can totally ignore the Stinkweed Imp, but I can actually kill the tracker. My opponent uses a Field of Ruin, and I do have basic lands in this deck, of course, because I'm playing tax, so that doesn't wreck me. And then Natural Orders away their Sylvan Safekeeper, which I'm able to remand in Natural Order, is so brutal. So I get to kill. He kills his creature for me. So now Sylvan Library, of course, I get to take a look here, and I've got the ability to steal a clue. So I'm going to mash for damage. I could have taken an extra card there, but I don't need an extra card yet. I need to get out of the danger zone with my life total. So I'm going to run down Jace. I feel like, I think what happened here was that I steal the clue. I don't think this was Jace, though. I think this was, I thought this was Teferi or something along those lines, and I kill the tracker, and then that's where he concedes. Anyway, that was my first set against 5-color bad stuff, though. Pretty neat games. Like, Highlander has a totally different feel when you're playing like Libraries of Alexandria and stuff. So second match of 3, and this is a keep hand. I've got Expedition map after all. Opponent leads off with an island. I love a nice slow hand against an Expedition map. I'm going to go ahead and just play map here. I take 2. It might not have been right, but I have Ivory Tower. It's probably okay. Opponent plays Sylvan. That's pretty brutal against me since I don't have Breya to pressure my opponent's life total. I go ahead and get fetch here and pass. 6 cards in hand. Opponent Sylvan's up and plays a True Name Nemesis. Oh, that's lovely. So I'm going to have to sack the map, and of course I go get King of all lands, Library of Alexandria. So I'm going to go ahead and play Library here, draw a card, and then immediately play Ivory Tower, hoping to get ahead of the True Name. I do have balance, but I don't want to balance cards out of my hand if I can help it. It's just a backup thing. I don't want to pull the trigger on it. I also have Create Spec to kill my opponent's Sylvan Library and Talisman if I want to, but I need to get to that point. So I'm going to Library during upkeep so I gain 4 life, find an Academy. So I'm going to run out Grim, Academy, Lotus, and then I'm going to Lotus for Quiet Spec. So I'm going to go get flashback cards, Ray, Grudge, and Deep. Standard package. And pass for the turn. So I am off of Library for a minute, but I have Deep Analysis and I have Factor Fiction and all this other good stuff going. My opponent plays this Ujin thing that makes creatures and colorless spells cheaper and kills permanents that are colored. Not so good. So during my upkeep, I Factor Fiction. My opponent brainstorms in response with Ivory Tower on the stack, of course, and then gives me a split like this. I see a Skull Clamp with the Lingering Souls. I take the Lingering Souls to Teferi. I gain some life. I draw, and I have to figure out how to deal with that Ujin. I could Teferi it down, but I decide what I'm going to do is Duretti first, kill their guy, let them draw an extra card, and then I'm going to balance. So I balance because I actually have 1 less card in hand than my opponent, and although I lose some lands, my opponent's going to discard. It kills their True Name. And I still haven't Deep Analysis yet to fill my hand back up, so I can still get back into active Library. But now my opponent's, he actually discards Supreme Verdict. He's got to enact that active Ujin, which is kind of bad for me. Thought Seizes me, which is real bad for me because that was the answer to Ujin. And then plays like a Mu Yang. I don't know what this Sky Dancer is. Anyway, for my turn, I'm going to go ahead and get up to 7 in Library immediately. start killing some of my opponent's permanents, flashback Lingering Souls, make a token because he chose to make a creature rather than because he had Numozoa's Jitte. I kill the Jitte and the Sylvan off my flashback cards. Opponent finally does kill my creature there, but I'm on library mode now with every tower running. I get a Sword of Feast and Famine, a Tezzeret out. And I just pass here because I can Mystical Teachings for Force of Will here. My opponent finally, sorry. So I use the Tezzeret, I'm going to pause. I use the Tezzeret to untap, and I'm sitting on the ability to Teachings into Force of Will. And the reason I did the Tezzeret and plussed it to 5 is that I can chump block, and then activate Tezzeret and ultimate and kill my opponent. So it forced my opponent to -3 the Ujin and kill the Ujin on the Tezzeret, which is what I wanted. I treated Tezzeret as a removal spell for this, and an extra, and it, didn't really cost me anything. Unfortunately, I tried the Teachings into my opponent's turn. He's got a counterspell for that. So I'm off library now for a little while. But I do have a little bit of search. And then I run in a flashback, a Teachings. And it sticks. So I go get Swords to Plowshares. I plow their bird. Equip my Sword of Feast and Famine. Attack my opponent. And use Float some mana, use Sensei's Divining Top, and see absolute garbage. So after combat, I'm going to shuffle those away, and I'm going to look again and see if I can find anything useful. And sort of, I find an Impulse. It's okay. I'm going to go ahead and move the Flashback the Lingering Souls to apply pressure. Opponent's down to 7 after all. And sorry about that. Anyway, so does find a Wasteland for me and decides to kill. I'm gonna Impulse in response, and then decides to kill Tolarian Academy finally, which makes perfect sense. Does get a 4/4 flyer, killing their using the last counter on their other commander there. Still no Ivory Tower running, but oh my gosh, look at that top deck. I run out Sensei's Divining Top. Attempt to will. Gets countered. But I have on the top of my library, and I knew this from having used top earlier, I have a Muddle the Mixture, so I top in response, kill the counter, and with I have exactly 1 mana floating, but I can replay library, and things are going to get stupid. So now I get to run out Zern Orb, Skull Clamp, which, look at that board, Expedition Map, Grim Monolith, a Tezzeret, get 6 more mana, right? To fairy, plow the creature there, clamp, draw some extra cards, because whenever it dies, it actually shouldn't. I don't think. Yeah, I guess that works. Anyway, and now I get all my mana back. Attack, untap all of my mana, including Tolarian Academy, and I also have the library back. Play the top because it's free. Clamp and draw. Clamp and draw. I find a Urza, which is going to produce even more mana. Run down Urza. Now I can library again. So I'll library. Talisman. To ready. Oh my gosh. Kill the Crucible. Remember, I can tap all of these artifacts for blue. Grab a Mind Twist. End my turn and untap my Library of Alexandria and my Tolarian Academy. It's still my end step. Impulse. I'm not done yet. Fact or fiction. It's just dumb. I was just having a good time at this point, right? Cryptic Command, a card back to my opponent's hand, and pass. I've got a discard. Okay, whatever. That seems like a pretty decent turn. Oh, and I'm in a library too. Okay, your turn. It's so dumb. Oh, that was hilarious and super fun. So was that? I can't remember if that was game 1 or game 2. Let's try. I think it was game 1. Anyway, yeah, game 2. I have to mulligan, and I go ahead and get down to just Jace and a counterspell here, and some mana, right? So I'm hoping that Jace can dig me into some card draw or business spells, and that counterspell will prevent me from losing. My opponent's got an Expedition Map, but then runs out an Ancient Tomb and is getting close to being able to kill me with Library. This is scary, and I top deck Wasteland. Yes! Good to play both a Wasteland and a Strip Mine, right? I'm going to go ahead and play Jace, because I assume my opponent's play is go get Library, but instead, he goes and gets a Wasteland. So draws for the turn, plays Wasteland, and kills me. I think the play was go get Library, but I actually have plenty of mana here, and I have a counterspell, so I'm actually going to get the counterspell up. Opponent Mystical Tutors here and runs into the Mystical Tutor for an Enlightened Tutor. Plays a land and passes, so because I have Enlightened Tutor, I'm going to go ahead and just not flip Jace here. So I'm just going to play a land and pass. Opponent ETs, I'm going to see what they get, and he goes and gets Crucible, so now I kill their 2-drop. I've got Jace with the Lingering Souls, something I was mentioning earlier. I'm going to go ahead and just throw away Lingering Souls, flip the Jace, and start plussing and passing, hoping to find some mana here. I was trying not to flip Jace because I didn't want to pass. I know my opponent's got the Crucible in hand, so that I can't play Sensei's Divining Top, because then they're going to get to Wasteland me, and that's just way too gnarly if that happens. I can run out. Now I can run out top because I find a land. My opponent mana drains a Sensei's Divining Top. A little questionable there. Not sure what they're going to do with that. I think what he's trying to do, though, is force the Crucible down. So instead gets a Thoughtseize. I let it go, so takes Counterspell, plays Crucible, correctly Wastelands me, and then of course I'm going to disenchant the Crucible end step. But now I'm a mana off from playing Narset again. This really is painful. Don't find a land, so I just plus up Jace and flashback Lingering Souls. Opponent gushes, so I'm going to try to put a little bit of pressure on my opponent. I top deck Crucible, which doesn't do me any good. So I can minus Jace. I plus up Jace and pass. I can minus Jace and disenchant something if there's a target later. But other than that, I can't really do a heck of a lot with Jace other than try to ultimate it. Opponent is now making a play. Are we chatting? What is going on here? No, we're going to bug out. I don't remember what my opponent's play was here. I don't remember what 5CB's play was here. I do remember that I top decked the Wooded Foothills, and I remember ultimating this Jace, playing Narset, and I start milling my opponent. And actually, the reason this game you don't see, I'm pretty sure the reason this one bugged is that from there or maybe I played a land and then just plus up Jace one more to 10, and then I ultimate it, and then I start going. But very shortly, so the entire rest of this game is just playing cards and milling my opponent for 5 over and over and over, 80 cards of it, and I actually get to the end of the game and mill him out. Although at the very end of the game, he turns the corner and has an advantage, but the advantage doesn't matter because he has like 3 cards left. So he finally gets some card drawing, like permanent card drawing, something like a Jace or whatever, but with only 3 cards left, he's done. And then my next play, of course, mills him out, and then he loses. So sucks that it didn't come through. Anyway, one more set, and then I think we're all done. So, all right, let's see here. And yet again, I have first turn kill if my opponent doesn't do something about it, but wisely he Inquisitions it away. Like I say, first turn kill, because you go get Library, man, it is done. Anyway, a lot of times. Anyway, opponent and Prince of Wrath of God on a Chrome Mox. This all makes perfect sense. But he's low on cards here, and I've got a hand that can get some cards going. A very strong hand, very comfortable with it, so I'm going to go ahead and play Windswept Teeth here and pass. Opponent's got, let's see, Sinkhole. So yeah, I'm going to attempt to Mana Leak that. And it sticks. Cool. So this is not the same deck. This is actually, he had his second deck, so he changed decks. Top deck a Mana Drain there is stellar. So I've got Impulse if nothing happens, counter for cheap spells, Mana Drain for expensive ones. That's expensive. Let's go. I'm going to drain into Jace, obviously. But I think I top deck, Crucible here. So I actually end up playing the Crucible land out of the graveyard into Jace, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, it's super, super strong, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hide the equipment and be done. I actually should have stuck a counterspell on top. in case my opponent had discard. So he's got Nether Void. This is a huge error, huge tactical error. We talked about this afterwards. I'm going to get rid of the Ivory Tower and the Clamp, and I'll keep the Sword. Replay a fetch land and just pass. Because Nether Void is going to counter any spell unless the player plays an additional 3. It affects both of us. It's a world enchantment, so if I played another world enchantment like the Abyss, it would actually kill this one. But counter every spell unless a player plays 3. Well, how are you going to do that against a Crucible and a Jace? I'm going to hit land drops forever, and he's got to hope that he hits land drops. So basically, Nether Void was the equivalent of Winter Orbing yourself. So tactical error, he realizes it, and just scoops up right on the spot. All right, so last game here. I have to mulligan. Unfortunately, I had that first turn. I have to double mulligan, as a matter of fact, and I mulligan into this super weak hand. But it has the potential. It can protect itself, and it has Winter Orb, so it can. If the game goes slowly enough, then I might be okay, right? I do draw a Workshop, which is okay. But the other thing with the Stoneforge Mystic going with the Winter Orb is that, well, I have to force here. So I double mulligan and force a will, so like I'm almost completely dead here. But the other thing I was going to say is with Stoneforge, if I go get, if I got Sword, which I think is the, okay. So if I had Sword of Feast and Famine, I'd have a way to work around the Winter Orb. But the reason I go get Skull is that if I go get Sword of Feast and Famine, my opponent just kills this, which they're playing a lot of removal, then that's that. But if I go get Batterskull, my opponent may see, okay, if I kill the Stoneforge, he can't play the Batterskull. So he's incentivized to kill the Mystic, and I want him killing the Mystic and leaving my mana and my hand alone. So if he with the Batterskull, I'm hoping that what I can do is convince him to kill the Mystic so that I can go land surprise Batterskull and then follow it up with Winter Orb. Or I can go land Winter Orb and then next turn Batterskull, right? So that's what I want to happen. So he's thinking for a while, continuously playing, and realizes that he made a huge mistake. Remember, this is Highlander. This is Highlander. This is not Commander. This command tower doesn't produce mana. And that unfortunately kind of ruins this game. I mean, I did double mulligan and then have to force a will, so I'm down 4 cards, but my opponent's down 1 and it's a land drop, and that's a big deal. It changes the whole flavor of the game, and as you'll see, it ends up costing my opponent the entire game. So I run out Winter Orb here because I have active Stoneforge Mystic, and I can still sneak the Batterskull into play now. And this just causes a headache for my opponent if he tries to make a play. He doesn't, so I am going to still sneak the Batterskull out. And he has a claim immediately for it, so I gain some life, but that's about it. Unfortunate. I'm going to go ahead and bash in and pass. Bash in. I'm going to attack for 1 and pass. And now with the Winter Orb in play already, and my opponent gets the Abyss too. It's real strange to be running both the Abyss and the other thing, but maybe he wants a way to transition from one to the other, and I top deck Ray of Revelations. So good. If I want to get rid of it, I can. However, I'm trying to build up mana for Yawgmoth's Will. I don't know that I guess I do kill it, but it's not the greatest play ever. I'm going to go ahead and preordain here also. And I decided to get rid of Urza because I'm actually just looking for artifact mana is what I'm trying to find, that I can play off of that Workshop. So we're playing a little Drago for a little while here. I do have a way to get around my own orb, multiple ways if I can just get the mana to do it. All right. Representing a counter spell here, but really don't have much going on. Opponent tithes. Neither does he, though. Plays a Wasteland. Kills my Workshop, which I actually think is pretty wise. The Workshop's is too much risk with the orb. However, I am happy to see it because I haven't drawn anything to do. So I probably could have value willed there for just a card, maybe a land and a preordain, but it just set me back so far underneath the Winter Orb. And I just decided I'm going to play top here. I can't really use the top, but we'll go ahead and just get it into play anyway. Opponent plays a Bloodghast. I'm not happy to see that because I don't have a great way to deal with it. And then a Tombstalker I'm real unhappy to see. So you can see this game is really, really challenging for me. I do find a counterspell there and decide I'm going to have to Deluge and hope that the orb's been encouraging land drops and then therefore he misses a land drop. It does happen, so I get a land there. I just random top, and I'm hoping to hit a second blue so I can have counterspell up. Instead, I hit Ivory Tower, and I decided that's probably good enough. And thank goodness I did, because my opponent Inquisitions me and takes the counterspell out of my hand. But now I am gaining enough life so that I don't have to worry too much about Bloodghast anymore. So now what I just need to do is I need to get back in this game somehow. All right, so I see Serum Visions. I've got Top. I've got Clamp. I can't do anything with these cards because my own Winter Orb is hurting me, but it is slowing my opponent down a lot. And he runs out this gigantic Garrick thing. And I thankfully draw a land finally. So this turn, I go ahead and bounce to Garrick and draw a card. I'm taking a bunch of damage, but I do have Ivory Tower running, and I've got a little bit of time before that Garrick comes back. So I gain some more life. And I run out Coalition Relic and Serum Visions. And I find myself, I tuck away both cards, I think. I may have set up the Trinket Mage on top, thinking that the Trinket will get me more mana to work with around the orb, but it will also block one of these wolves. All right, so still at 18 because of Ivory Tower. And for this turn, I'm going to go ahead and I just have too many cards. I'm just going to discard. I can't spend my mana. My opponent could play that Garrick here, but now you see how that command tower is really hurting my opponent. I think it's 7 mana, but if it's 6, he can't play it here. Either way, I'm going to kill my Winter Orb at the end of the turn with Flashback. And now I'm free to get something going here. And I run out a Giant Treachery thinking, okay, I've got this really good turn lined up. Oh, no, I run out of Mind Twist, right? I'm going to dump. Sorry. So I'm trying to kill that Garrick, right? I do not want that Garrick to hit. So the best thing I can do, pause. I don't run out of Treachery. I've got Ivory Tower. I just twist for 5, and I get Ujin, which is good, Sylvan Scrying, Day of Judgment, Mire and Misery, Toxic Deluge. Not a very happy series of cards for me. So the Giant Garrick is still in my opponent's hands, still a problem. Steady plays a Beseech the Queen and runs out Nether Void. Again with the Nether Void. I'm not impressed by the card at all. Anyway, I've got Ray of Revelation in the graveyard, so I just play land and pass. I gain a little bit of life off Ivory Tower. Again, the only thing keeping me in this game is that Ivory Tower. Opponent plays the Garrick and does not realize, and he feels really bad. Like, you just think that your lands should tap for mana, right? I don't know why Command Tower doesn't tap for a colorless. It really should, so that when this happens, you at least have colorless mana so that you don't get in this situation. But he plays the Garrick, and I was thinking, like, what am I going to do about it? But I realized, like, part of the reason I didn't make a play this turn was because of the Nether Void, and I was counting my opponent's mana. So he plays it, and the Nether Void says, do you have 3 mana? And he's like, oh god, can't tap his tower, and it gets countered. So I felt bad there, honestly. End of turn, I'm going to flashback Ray now, and if you'd have just waited a little while, I guess. But we'll go ahead and get rid of that Nether Void and charge my Coalition Relic. And from there, grab 3 more life, go to 8. I think this was the turn where I go for the big Treachery, because I feel like for tempo, I can Treachery into Teferi and it's a win. Yeah. I think that's the play. Oh, no, it's a Treachery will turn. So yeah, I get to run out Workshop, Batterskull, Winter Orb, Serum Visions, and pass. So Winter Orb, maybe I should have just gone Mind Twist there, but I go Orb. My opponent plays a Ratchet and kills all the tokens, including the 4/4. So now we're back to Winter Orb, but we're Winter Orb under a tower, and I've got mana sources. And so this is not looking too good. I've also got the Workshop back, so I can ultimately pick up Batterskull at some point. Opponent does play a Flashback Lingering Souls. I even draw a man for that. Like, everything going wrong here for my opponent. Hits me for 2 more damage, of course. Not anything I'm concerned with due to the Ivory Tower. And I go ahead and use Stop during upkeep, so I actually gain a life for the turn. I'm going to go ahead and Trinket. And I'm going to fetch myself a Zurin Orb, and there is 0 chances that I'm going to die this game. That was the equivalent of gaining 14 life for 0 mana when I play the Orb. Of course, I'm gaining life here as well. I've got Better Skull ready to go at some point. Whether Wayfarer comes down, I run down to top, pass. I could have played Clamp, but I want to use the Wayfarer, and of course with Zern Orb I can. So my opponent does play a land, knowing that might as well. I go and untap the Workshop. With Ivory Tower on the stack, I use Wayfarer. I go get Tellurian Academy, gain a ton of life, and Academy's down. I can now tap for so much mana. I bounce the Batter Skull, replay the Batter Skull with mana left over. Yet again, another Skull. I get a Chase down plus for my opponent's turn because now I'm not super worried about what getting extra cards. I just want to make sure that it's really hard for my opponent to do anything. He DTs here, plays a Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. Don't really think that's great. I'm going to go ahead and stack all my abilities and use Weathered Wayfarer in response. Of course, you know what I'm going to get, Library of Alexandria. I'll go ahead and pay for the Germ here, but I'll let the Wayfarer die. He's fetched up a Library and an Academy. I think he's done his job. Excuse me. Play a Library and draw a card. Draw more cards off Chase. Play lots of mana sources. And yeah, that's it. All done. Opponent's had enough. And he finally concedes here. Pretty interesting, I think. What a fun format. I love, man, my goodness, can you imagine if Breya could go get Library, Academy, play Balance? Oh, such juicy, wonderful cards. It feels so good to be able to play this. And even though I don't have Breya and I don't have 30 life, well, obviously, life wasn't interesting how strong Ivory Tower was in this particular game. When my opponent was hitting me for 6 a turn at one point, and then 4 per turn, 4 per turn, 4 per turn. And I mean, at the end of the game, I'm at 16, doing just fine with an extra 18 life in my back pocket over here, thanks to Zern Orb. Crazy, right? Lots of fun. And Zern Orb, of course, is a card that you can play when you're running Balance and Tellurian Academy, land tax, and so forth. It becomes a much better card, especially, being able to trinket for it. So yeah, I had a really good time with those, and I really would like to play some more. I'd very mumuch like to play some more of this format. Such a pleasure to be able to play with my old friends Library of Alexandria and Tellurian Academy and Balance, cards I haven't played in forever. And also just having access to being able to play all 5 colors is really interesting. I don't think in the games I was playing against him that I had Fast, Bond, and Deathrite, or Bolt. I don't remember what the 3 cards were, but at any rate, you got a sense of how it works, and hopefully you enjoyed it. I don't think by any means this is the end of this deck. This isn't built to perfection, right? But it is pretty interesting, pretty fun. So, all right, that's it. Thank you for watching this incredibly long video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Should have another one with the 1v1 games coming up pretty soon, and let me know what you think. I'll see you next time.